I'm Mario Castro. I'm a pulmonologist here at Florence Jewish Hospital, professor of medicine and pediatrics. So I'd like to introduce Jennifer. Jen Mosher in the back. Jen is our administrator for the Office of Faculty Development in the Department of Medicine. And the purpose of this afternoon's workshop is really just to help you develop your clinician educator portfolio, to understand a little bit more about the promotion process within the Department of Medicine, and allow you all to hopefully get promoted. So the first part here that I'm going to present is a little bit more about the promotion process, CV, and then I'm going to turn it over to Angela to go into a little bit more detail about the clinician educator portfolio. Our hope is to get this done, introduction part done in about a half hour or so, and then leave the majority of time for you to spend with some senior faculty in terms of reviewing your personal clinician educator portfolio. If you brought one, if you didn't, then at least you can listen to some of the comments that people that brought and reviewed together. We found that it's very helpful for people to kind of get through their own personal experience. So this is the phone number, the website, which we have a lot of helpful information there, all the way from introducing St. Louis to what else is on there? AFGAR document.
The AFGAR document, there are examples of the CEP and the CV.
Yep.
There's information about what to do on the weekends in St. Louis, but general department information as well.
So please use that resource. We're going to talk about the CV and what's the difference between that and your clinician educator portfolio, the promotion process, and then, like I said, Angela's going to go into more detail about the CEP. This is our mission, is really to help you all with guidance and resources that foster both your professional and personal development. This is how our bosses make us feel, right? That's fantastic. So one of the key things that's mentioned here is, I'm sure you're starting to learn as you get into a faculty position, is really to track your efforts. And there are so many things that we have to fill out. Paper-wise, a lot of those are listed here. The key ones really are your CV and your CEP, and that's really your, the conglomeration of all these things. If you're on your grants, your NIH BioSketch and other support, your training, your trainee tables, your records of effort, your community activities, scholarship research activities, honors and awards. And so this is a place to record in these two documents all this activity. Don't have time to write performance reviews, so I'll just criticize you. This is a good model for our faculty. So one of the things that we stress is really to interact with your mentors. That's not necessarily the same as your bosses. Update them on a regular fashion, and really to be proactive. On my own division, I had to be proactive. It wasn't like my division chief was asking me for these things, and so I had to seek out to meet with them. So don't be shy. It's much more important that you are proactively seeking that feedback. And also go in there prepared. We're really with a list of things that you'd like feedback on your progress, and then help with assessing your priority list. Perhaps you'd like some feedback about that. And so your CV and your CEP are really going to be critical for your division chiefs and your mentors to help guide you. And so you should be thinking about on that, at least on an annual basis, reviewing that with your division chief, and certainly other mentors that help you. So the promotion process, we're going to talk about briefly first. It does have to go through your division chief, and then your division chief we'll start to discuss this with the department chair, Dr. Frazier, and then start to develop a portfolio for your promotion. And that portfolio includes your CV, your CEP, letters of recommendations, and your key manuscripts. And so this book basically is prepared for the promotions committee to review. And that promotion process is, again, founded on the 3 pillars of excellence that we have at WashU: research, clinical, and education. A lot of the promotion process is outlined in the APGAR document. So this is the academic promotions guide that is basically the policy for our university for promotion. That APGAR document is many pages. So did we put a copy of that in the folder? So there is a copy of that in there. Wherever you are in your process of promotion, there is a specific language in there that's specific to you in terms of your steps, and also this is available electronically at our website. Some of the steps we'll talk about here subsequently, but the first step is really internal department review. Then there's an ad hoc committee. That ad hoc committee, interestingly, has nobody from the Department of Medicine on it. So these are people from biology, surgery, pediatrics, and so on that are part of that. And often involves a number of the department chairs and 2 to 3 senior faculty representatives. So that ad hoc committee is in essence your promotion committee that reviews your application. If that passes that level of the committee, then it goes to the next level of approval, which is the executive faculty. And then once it is approved by the executive faculty, it goes on to the board. I would say most of what happens in the first 2 levels, your internal review and feedback. That's where they're going to say, no, you need to wait, get a couple more papers published, or strengthen your expertise in this area, or may go to the next level, and there may be a weight that's put there at that point. So those are really the 2 key. The other 2 subsequent steps happen, I think, pretty straightforward. So this is an example of an individual that would start this process. Say they were hired here in October of 2009, and they would start that process, say, at this time point. Their tenure clock started here in 2009, and around this time period, you're getting at 4 to 5 years. You want to start thinking about that. When is your promotion going to happen? And you have to think that promotion process potentially could be up to a 2-year process. So in this example, promotion paperwork was to the chair's office in February of 2017. That went through that internal process that we talked about, but the next Board of Trustees meeting was not until March of 2018. And so there's a delay that's because of that Board of Trustees meeting until it's finally finalized. There is a package that's developed that we talked about. First, your division head has to agree with the decision to promote you, and then begins that processing packet. Once that process packet is completed, then it goes to the chair's office. I would say that Dr. Frazier is pretty particular about the documents that come for the promotion process and the formatting. We'll talk about that subsequently. So a lot of that gets sent back to you if she feels that it's not in perfect order. Then they'll give that back to you, and then it can come back to them for final department chair approval. Then the division chief, and then this ad hoc committee approval occurs usually within 2 to 4 months after that. Then after that comes the executive faculty, and then the board of trustees. For those that are on the investigator track, that's when you are on the tenure consideration as well. Dr. Fraser is very particular about the spelling, grammar, punctuation, and formatting. So if those things are not your strength, I definitely advise you to seek somebody to give you some input on that. And it definitely has to be in a final format for going there. You do have to have a CV in the proper WashU format. As Angela mentioned, we have examples of your CV appropriate in the WashU format on the website, the Office of Faculty Development website. Dr. Fraser has given us feedback in this CV is don't worry about putting numbers and letters in there. She prefers that we don't do that, even though I think if you go to the Office of Faculty Affairs, their template one still has the numbers and so on in it. She feels that just wastes a lot of your time and effort and space and so on, so she doesn't necessarily want to see your CV numbered like that. So here's an example of Tom Spur, who I'm sure a number of you know, the Division of Medical Education. And one other point here that Tom's nice picture brings up is that Dr. Fraser wants your picture added to your CV, so that can help for the person who's together with your CV. So it's something that's a little bit different than some of the other medical schools. And this is just an example of the appropriate formatting on Burr's CV. And I'll stop there and turn it over to Angela.
What is numbers and letters? Like, I'm confused. Extraneous numbers and letters?
Yeah, so this would be like Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. You don't have to put all those numbers.
Oh, okay.
So if you're doing an outline format.
If you're doing like an outline,
Yeah. So it is an outline format, then right. Instead of using 1 and then A and then numeric 1, she prefers indentations. And on the bottom of that sheet over there, but I think the sheet that you're looking at that says Clinical Educator Portfolio Tips and General Information at the bottom, there's a few things about formatting. Avoid numbered lists, may use indentations, use habits, margins, and no need to repeat the demographic data that's included on the CV. And then on this example of the CV, there's some more sort of formatting information that's at the top in the yellow. So everything that's highlighted in yellow really has to do with formatting.
Yeah, there's some good tips on here, like first to see it chronological order for your first publication ever in your life. That's the first number, and then you keep on going from there. So the most recent publication is going to be at the very bottom. So everything's in that chronological order from oldest to newest. Don't put your Social Security number on here because that is sensitive information. And then the last thing, in that template, sometimes there are sections that are not appropriate for your CV. Just delete those. You don't have to put that heading in there if it's not appropriate for it.
All right, so moving on to the Clinician Educator portfolio, one of the things that's mentioned in the AFDAR document for those on the clinician track, this is required for all faculty. So make sure you have your CV. And the CEP is basically an adjunct or a supplement to your CV. And it gives more detailed information about your clinical, educational, and community service activities. And as we go through the different sections, there'll be some examples on some of the slides of what your CV may say compared to what your CEP may say. And the CEP is the opportunity to really expound, really explain what you're doing, because as Mario mentioned, on the committee, there's no one from the Department of Medicine. There are other department chairs, and some of them are basic scientists who have no clue what we do on this side of the street. So you want to give as much information as possible so they do understand the breadth of your work and can really appreciate what you're doing. So don't undersell yourself. There's no need to write, these full, detailed, long paragraphs, but you want to give enough information so that it's clear what you're doing. And again, this showcases the quality and the extent of your clinical expertise. This is really where you showcase yourself, any educational scholarship you've done, or any other areas that would not be covered in the traditional CV. So it's not to be repetitive. This is to be a supplement and definitely not duplicate what's there. The other thing is that this is a real-time document. One of the things we encourage you to do is that as you go through these activities, as your clinics change, as your clinical responsibilities change, if you give lectures each year, if you're invited as an invited lecturer, as soon as that's over, go ahead and add it to your CEP. That's the one nice thing about keeping in chronological order. You just add it right to the list and keep going. And that way you at least keep up with the things you're doing. For a number of us who've been here a number of years, when we started to do this CEP, it was a bit of a challenge to think back, 10, 15 years about some of these. I mean, no one wants to know a lecture that I gave 15 years ago, but my positions and what I was doing clinically, we did have to summarize some of that stuff. So the more you keep this up to date, the better. Also, you can use this as a tool for your career development and strategic planning. So hopefully when you're meeting with your division chiefs, if you have your CEP and you review that with them, this is an opportunity where you can really kind of identify not only what your areas of clinical expertise are, but what some other areas may be. If you're interested in quality improvement measures, you may see that over the last 5 years, all of the committees that you've been on from the standpoint of a hospital or your department or within the medical school have to do with quality improvement. And that may be an area of expertise that's clear when you look through your CEP, but you're not going to see that on your CV. So using this as a tool for career development and strategic planning of this. Some people actually do add a personal mission statement at the top of their CEP. That's not necessary, but if you go online, and the ones that we have, I think there is one that has that personal mission statement. It's someone who has a primary focus in education. Think about your career goals and objectives, long-term strategic plan, and then maybe your personal theory of teaching and learning. And again, there's some examples on the different websites. So just to go through the document, we sort of have an abbreviated slide set here. There's a complete full version on the OFD website. But if you follow along with the slides, the two documents that you can't see some of this, but the two documents that you have in your folder, one gives the basic template. These are the general headings. And again, if you don't have anything in one of these headings, just leave that section blank. And then the other document says template guidelines. It just basically goes through, and this is sort of a recapitulation of what's on the slides, just goes through and gives a brief description of what each of these major subheadings mean and represent. So the first major heading is the clinical contributions. And here, under summaries of ongoing clinical activities, you want to give a general idea of what you do day to day in your clinics. So this example says general infectious diseases, inpatient consultation, service attending from 2010 to present. And you want to let the person know, what do you really do? So 2 to 12 weeks per year, 6 hours per day. How busy are you? What do you do there? Daily supervision of infectious disease fellows, internal medicine residents, and medical students in management of general infectious disease patients admitted to Barnes Jewish Hospital. Daily documentation of all findings, review of records and training notes, meeting with ancillary staff, led daily education sessions for medical students, residents, and ID fellows, averaged 450 new consults seen per year. That gives a pretty good description of what you do as a clinician based on your role as the general ID inpatient consult attending. Another example at the bottom, similarly, bone and joint infectious disease consult attending, 7 to 10 weeks per year, 6 hours per day. Same thing, supervision, personal evaluation of all new consults, and at the bottom, average of 285 new consultations seen per year. That gives a general description to the reviewer. And these are just other examples. Now, the role changed a little bit in 2011, so you want to highlight that. From 2011, you also started an outpatient clinic. So you're an outpatient clinic attending 1 half-day clinic per week, supervising infectious disease fellows, residents, nurse practitioners, documentation, similar, average of 750 outpatient visits per year. The next year, for 1 year, you were the medical director of the ID outpatient clinic. Okay, so these are all clinical responsibilities that you want to capture, describing what that actually means. In 2010 to 11, you also did a clinic out at Barnes West County Hospital. Okay? So for this period of 2010 to present, you were the inpatient consult attending, you had an outpatient clinic, you did the you were the medical director for a while, and you were also at Barnes West County Hospital. That's a nice summary so you can see that you weren't just sitting in your office all the time. You're actually doing some work, seeing folks. All right? The next section, development of methods for improved quality and efficiency of clinical care. The example here, physician peer support, Washington School of Medicine. After medical errors, much of the focus is on providing support to the affected patient and their family. However, the physicians involved often suffer in silence, which may significantly impact their personal, but that's just an example of the description of what that actually means. So, how does this look if you're comparing the CD and the CDP? This is another slide on the format. That's out of place. Okay, sorry. Oh well. Sorry about that. That whole slide was completely out of place. Well, I just went over all of this, but describing all your inpatient and outpatient clinical activities, location, type of service, time on service, and responsibilities. That's what I basically showed in those examples that we just went through. Describe the area of need. This is the development of method section to improve quality and efficiency of clinical care. Describing the area of need, what was developed, documentation guidelines, outreach clinics, and so forth. Who was involved in the development? Was it you alone? Was there a team, a team approach? And who was the target audience? Okay? Were there any clinical trials or grants? Include only trials related to patient-oriented research. So for some people, this becomes a question of duplication because we have a lot of folks on the clinician track who also do research. They do a small amount of clinics, but they may actually have significant, independent funding. Some have R01s and so forth. So for the most part, if you have R01 funding, that's the kind of thing that you're going to definitely list on your CV. You don't need to repeat that here. This, if you're doing clinical trials with industry, maybe you're collaborating on trials that you don't get any % effort for, that kind of thing, you definitely want to put on your CEP. Because those are things that, a lot of the industry-sponsored trials we typically don't put on our CV, but you can include them. Okay? And, a lot of times that's an area that folks have questions about, just kind of talk to someone, what do you think about this? Should this go on my CV or should this actually carry over to my CEP? And then you can explain exactly what your role was in those other trials. Definitely want to explain the role. And keep non-governmental granting agencies as well. That would go on your CEP. If you have any clinical administrative responsibilities, so for example, that was the example that I just mentioned a minute ago, the medical director of the infectious disease clinic. So if you're the clinical director of the area, if you're the director of a fellowship or residency training program, if there are nurse practitioners or physician assistants in your clinics that you oversee, then you want to describe what your responsibilities are there. And again, what's the role, what's the activity that you provide, and definitely what's the time commitment. Okay? In some of these things, you're actually committing a very significant amount of time, and you want to make sure that you capture that when you enter your descriptor on your CEP. Okay? Original contributions to the medical literature. This is still in the clinical contributions. Again, you don't want to duplicate your CV. You can say CV to reference it, but here you also can include non-traditional publications. So if you have things that are online or in non-peer-reviewed journals, okay, anything that you may have developed, like any educational pamphlets, CDs, DVDs, that are for health professionals. So not for lay. There's another section that actually encompasses what you developed for the lay literature. But the main thing here is these are things that are developed for health professionals, CDs and DVDs. Again, you want to do these in chronological order, and if there's more than you involved, make sure you bold your name through reference. Feedback is kind of tricky because you get feedback from different levels. The medical students provide feedback, the residents, fellows. We have our faculty practice plan surveys. Sometimes families may write letters and provide feedback in that way. The thing about putting feedback on there is that if you go to where your medical student summaries or your resident summaries are, what are you going to do? You're going to pull out the statement that says, best attending I ever had. Wonderful to work with Dr. Brown. But anyway, wonderful to work with Dr. Brown on the cardiology service. Okay, that's bias. So, because you're not going to pull out, it was an okay rotation or okay to work with her. So one of the suggestions is that if you have a senior faculty member, like your division chief, or someone senior in your division, who can maybe look at this and write just a brief summary for you, and you don't have to include that in your CV, you can actually have that as an attachment, okay? So that you don't take up a lot of space there. But just be careful how you include comments specifically in your CV, because it's all going to be glowing. I mean, you're not going to put anything that's not. Some of the evaluations actually do have number ratings. So if you were to go into, say, the resident ratings, and you see where, during the academic year, 2015-16, your rating was 4.75 out of 5, well, that's very objective data, okay? So if you do have some objective data like that, that's okay to put in, but the subjective things, just be a little bit cautious about how you add those. Okay? The next major section is on the educational contributions. The first one is on didactic teaching sessions. Here you want to indicate your role. Were you the course master, any courses that you may have lectured, or if you were a small group leader, like in the Practice of Medicine 1 or Practice of Medicine course, Practice of Medicine 1 or Practice of Medicine 2 courses. Describe the course and lectures that you've given, symposia, panels. What exactly was your role? What did it mean to be the small group leader? How many students, how many times per week? How much preparation time? Did you have to develop your own materials, or were they provided? That kind of thing. Indicate your target audience. Again, the time commitment, number of hours per week, month, or year. Is this just something you do 1 week a year, or is it a monthly commitment all through the academic year? And again, don't undervalue yourself. Even if it's something that you do year after year, you always give the infectious disease pathophysiology lecture on leishmania, I don't know, and you've given that for 10 years, indicate that you're the person who's given that for 10 years and what that actually means. So just make sure you capture what you're doing. Don't just put that you have that lecture down there, and the implication is you've done it once. You're the expert on leishmania. So we want to make sure that that's actually if you've been... Yes.
Would you demonstrate that you've done it for that long by just saying whether 2006 to present?
You can say 2006 to present, but then again, make sure you explain. I've been the lecturer here. I've prepared exactly what that involves. Is it the didactic lecture to the entire second year class, where you lecture for 2 hours, and then you also have a 2-hour workshop on this, which is the difference between this. I lecture. I've given this lecture for 10 years. So just be specific. Spell it out. And again, I really encourage you, look at the examples that we have on the website and the examples that are also embedded in the slides that are on the website as well, because we do go through and give specific examples of how you would explain that on the CEP compared to how it may be listed on your CV. Okay? All right. New courses that you may have been involved with, or lectures, describe the purpose. What's the gap that was filled? Was this something that you saw a need and you developed this course? Why? Who helped you? Again, what's the target audience and what's the time commitment? And this is just an example. Course master, Introduction to Newborn Medicine 1 was one selected. The purpose of this 10-hour course is to provide an introduction into newborn medicine, not otherwise offered in the first year curriculum. Students review functional organ system development and correlating normal physiology. That's just a brief description. Any new handouts or other guides for trainees, syllabi, slides, other guides, any enduring material. Did you work on develop a 10-minute neural consult for the third-year medical students on the internal medicine rotation? For curriculum, describing the course content, and again, don't forget the time commitment. That's very important. How much time are you really spending on this to give an idea of what your commitment is to it? Moving on to still under educational under the educational contributions, development of new methods of education, whether it's simulation models, any assessment tools such as exam questions, checklists, objective structured exams. Here's an example of a 3-minute daily feedback form for medical student evaluation. Okay? anything, all of that goes. It may sound like it's a small thing within the rotation, but it's an important part of the rotation. So you want to capture that on your CEP because that's something that you were responsible for. Mentoring of trainees, grad students, fellows, med students, and so forth. Now, here, it's, again, you have to be selective. If a resident comes by your office and says, I want to talk to you about what was it like to be a fellow in infectious disease, and you meet with them for an hour and you never talk to them again, you probably shouldn't put that on your CEP, their name, the time period, and the activity if it was 1 hour. You had a conversation. But if this is someone who, came and you met with monthly, you talked about their career development, you gave them advice, they, brought their career plan to you, maybe they were in your lab, you gave them guidance, you helped connect them with other people, so that you are actively involved in helping them set their course for their career, then I think you can count that as a mentoring opportunity. Okay? So just be cautious that the people that you list here are really people that you've mentored, not just simply had a conversation with. So we want to see the name of the mentee, the time period, what that activity actually entailed. Was it a formal mentoring process through like the CRTC or like the Doris Duke Fellowship or something like that? Or was this a department or division mentoring program? What's their current position? If this is someone you mentored and they've gone on now to become the chief of nephrology at the Brigham, hey, that's wonderful. Put that down there. If that's what they did. And then again, describe the type of mentorship, career development, one-on-one training in a particular area of expertise. Okay, and sometimes you might want to think about if you have multiple of these, creating like a trainee table so that you can include this. Because a lot of people do have a lot of mentees, so a way that you can capture the breadth of your work in mentorship, particularly if that's a strong focus of what you do. Development and participation in CME courses, any conferences, workshops, seminars, grand rounds that you participate in. Make sure you list the course name, what your role is, the topic, the location, and the date, and again, list these in chronological order. So if you go out every year and give grand rounds at St. Luke's, you give grand rounds at St. Luke's, make sure you put that on there because that's a part of CME. If you participate in the ADA, the American Diabetes Association meeting every year as a lecturer, then every year, what was your topic, where was it, and so forth. Just put that on there and include it. Again, we're back to feedback, honors and awards. The feedback from the medical students, try to be selective. If you have any objective data, that's great. But there are other things here. For example, the medical school gives the annual teaching awards. Include that. If you received one of the low teaching fellowships, put that in. But if you put the low teaching fellowship, if you're the recipient, you might want to give a little bit of an explanation of what that teaching fellowship is. That's very prestigious. But if I'm always in my basic science lab, I don't have a clue, and I see that, I don't know. But that's a very prestigious award, so make sure you give a description so we know what these awards really are. That you were chosen out of umpteen and how much and so forth to show the significance of it. Okay? Clinical Lecturer of the Year Award. That's by the medical students, and don't take that one lightly because they can chew you up. So get that. Make sure you explain what that means. Similarly, like Clerkship Director of the Year. So spell out what it is and the importance. Now, lay literature here, we're talking about relevant articles, DVDs, pamphlets, that go into the lay literature. So if you write a weekly column for the Do News or a weekly column for the Coast Dispatch, or if you do, a weekly TV show for Channel 4 or something, that's where this goes. Anything that's for the lay public. Now, community service. Community service is very important because we want you to be involved in the community. We're talking about the WashU community in addition to the community around us, but that also includes your national and your international community as well. So how do I get community service? Well, pursue these opportunities. Again, senior faculty, talking to your division chief, other senior members who may sponsor you. Why don't I nominate you for this committee? That's how you get involved in these positions. When hospital committees are looking for people, volunteer for some of the things. If it's an area of interest, don't just volunteer so that you have something to put on your CEP. And if you volunteer, make sure you go and you're an active participant. Because what you want to do here is if you list that you're on the hospital whatever committee, you want to be able to say what that committee is about, how often it meets, what your role was, and what your how did you participate. not just simply that you're a member and you showed up once a year to this one committee. Okay, so if you do pursue these type of committees, make sure you're an active participant when you do too. So make sure you describe it, and again, the time commitment. Pursue leadership at the local, regional, and national level, particularly in your fields of expertise. You know, if you're in diabetes, nephrology, ID, become involved in those societies, and try to get involved at different levels. Again, what's your role, the time commitment, if you're on editorial boards, manuscript review committees, grant review committees, that kind of thing. That all fits into this spectrum. And again, senior faculty are a great way to find out about these opportunities that may be available. Media activities, we all get calls periodically from WashU Media Relations, sometimes PJ Media Relations, to talk about something. If you're comfortable doing those things, it's great. Sometimes go on radio, TV, or give a quote for the newspaper, and they'll give you some guidance. Don't say anything stupid, but that's an awesome opportunity, a really fun opportunity really to participate. Public relations will often have outreach events. Sometimes they do the health fairs. There's the WashU employee health fair where they're always looking for people. So that counts. They've done things like, I hate to say it, in Rams Park, and they wanted folks to come out and give health information. So participating in those types of events also are very important as well. So these are just some of the examples, and real quick. So for example, community service contributions on your CV. Well, this is actually education. But your CV, they say clerkship. No, this is actually community service. This is a national organization. The traditional CV, it says clerkship directors in internal medicine, which is a national group from 2001 to 2000 to present. Okay? But on your CEP, it's the clerkship directors in internal medicine. But what it is, it's a specialty organization. 2001 to 4, the education committee. 5 to 7, vice chair of the curriculum committee and the council. 2007 to 9, treasurer. 9 to 10, president-elect. And 2010 to president, the president. So on the CEP, that's where you really get to see what did it mean to be on the clerkship directors in internal medicine board. All right, and then there's this category of other, which basically means anything that's relevant or unique that didn't fit in any other category. This is the opportunity to actually put it there. Okay. So in summary, the APGAR document you have a copy of, or it's on our website. The CB, you have a templated copy of that. But again, go to ofd.worcester.edu. And same thing for the CEP. We have examples, different types of examples there as well. And if you have any questions, make sure you get in contact with this also. What we're going to do now is break into small groups. If you do have your CEP with you, we have Dr. Wayne, raise your hand, and Dr. Cowley, raise your hand, Dr. Castro, and myself. I think we only have 6 people, so we might kind of redo the groups a little bit. And what we want you to do is just to get into these small groups and go over your CEP. And I think the nice thing about doing this in groups is that you hear other people's questions and you can learn from each other's CEP. It's about 4:15, so we've allotted about 45 minutes for that. If you get done before that, that's fine. In your packet is also an evaluation, so make sure you fill out that evaluation. The other thing I'd like to throw out there is you will be getting an email for an event that we're having at the end of April. It's a mentoring and career development dinner, dialogue, and speed mentoring. It's going to be up in the King Center. I think that's a Wednesday night from 5:30 to 7:30. And basically we'll have dinner, we'll have tables set up, and there'll be senior faculty there. So you can just kind of come, get to meet some of the senior faculty, talk about career development, talk about, what does it mean to be a mentee? What are my responsibilities as a mentee? And kind of hear a little bit about mentoring, because we want everyone to be successful. And I think one of the things you'll learn is that a lot of times your mentor is someone in your division, but you can have multiple mentors. Okay? And this is an opportunity to meet some of those people who might be an additional mentor for you because you have something else. Okay, any questions? Okay.